the fundamentals. Last week we spoke about the fundamentals of the positive side of Shabbat. What are the things that we are supposed to do on Shabbat? And we spoke about the idea of zachor and shamor, of the request to remember Shabbat and to keep Shabbat. And we said that shamor refers more to the side of what we shouldn't do, which would be most of what we learn regarding Shabbat. And zachor, remembering Shabbat, is the positive side of what should we do to remember Shabbat? What should we do to keep Shabbat in the positive sense? Not what not to do, but what should we do? And today we will. Last week we also spoke about preparing for Shabbat, which already the main ideas of the positive side of keeping Shabbat kicked in. The idea of honoring the Shabbat, kvod Shabbat, and the idea of what is it that Shabbat includes in the sense of preparing for Shabbat. Today we will speak about from the moment that Shabbat starts. We will talk about Shabbat evening, and hopefully next week we will speak about the Shabbat day. There are a lot of things that are connected to the Shabbat evening, and I think the style that we will learn, since most of the things you can read in the book, I think that what we will do is also explain the origin, the sources of where do we take each and every idea of Shabbat Eve, and also run through what we are supposed to do and give opportunity for people to ask questions, because anybody who started to keep Shabbat, these laws are pretty well known. We go through them every Shabbat. Maybe not like the things that are forbidden on Shabbat that need a little more learning. Maybe there are things that you don't yet know that you're not supposed to do, or things that you're not sure how to do exactly. But the positive things, the routine actions of what we do on Shabbat, on the prayer and in the meal, I think most of us could be familiar with it more or less. And so it's a good opportunity to ask questions and to clarify and to have sort of a basic ground for how exactly we do things. So I think that should be the focus in this class and in next week's class. We will go over the things. I think it won't shortly, and on each period I will give opportunities to ask questions, and that would be anybody who has encounters something that it's not clear for them yet, both in the practical side and in the side of the theoretical side, is welcome to ask. And we're making here a pact that since we are all of us are in different stages of knowledge, and still we all have questions. I have questions too, so it's not a shame to ask. And this is a good place where we speak about the fundamentals of Jewish life. This is a place to ask the questions. Of course, each person should also consult their rabbi. But I invite you in every subject to ask and to try and see if there's something that you keep going through without being clear to you. So let's start. We left off last week.
Rav Natan,
Uh-huh.
just a technical note to everyone. Shavua Tov. This is like a closed classroom. So even though there is a recording, I want everyone to feel that it's a private channel and it won't be shared outside of this room, so to say. So I hope that, well, if anyone feels uncomfortable because this is being recorded or shared elsewhere, just to keep that in mind, that only the people in the room right now are the ones who will be able to hear or to see any of your questions or comments. I just wanted to mention that.
Thank you. So we left off right when Shabbat started. We talked about the things that we should prepare right before Shabbat, and now Shabbat starts. And how does Shabbat start? Shabbat starts with candle lighting. And candle lighting, the source of candle lighting is from the sages. It's a mitzvah de Rabbanan and not the Oraita. There's no source in the Torah, there's no pasuk that clearly states that we need to light candles. But our sages, from a very, very early stage, it's clear in our sources that we see that the people of Israel are lighting candles. And it's a bit of it's an interesting thing to look at. Why are we lighting candles on Shabbat? Just before I lay out the reasons that are written on the left, I wanted to bring one of the earliest sources that goes back to the time of our sages, that mention candle lighting as if it's a simple and well-known thing. And since it's also in our Parashat Shavua, the next Parashat Shavua, Parashat Chayei Sarah, I thought that this could be very interesting for us and also fitting for the week. Would anybody like to read the source? It could be in English also.
I can do it.
Yes, please.
And Isaac brought her into the tent of Sarah, his mother. All the days that Sarah was alive, a cloud was connected to the entrance of her tent. When she died, the cloud stopped. And when Rebekah came, the cloud returned. All the days that Sarah was alive, the doors were open wide. When she died, the wideness stopped. And when Rebekah came, the wideness returned. And all the days that Sarah was alive, there was a blessing in her dough. And when Sarah died, that blessing ended. When Rebekah came, the blessing returned. All the days that Sarah was alive, there was a candle that would burn from Shabbat Eve to the Shabbat Eve, and when she died, the candle stopped. And when Rebekah came, the week-long flame of the candle returned.
Yes, so this is a beautiful midrash. A midrash is a source from the time of the Mishnah of our sages. And this is a beautiful source that describes the continuation between Sarah, our mother, and Rivka, our mother. And I just want to lay out that it was a dramatic turn of events when Isaac brings Rebecca, Rivka, into Sarah's tent. Sarah was the matriarch of the family, and I'm sure that it was a big loss when she passed away. And the Midrash sort of describes what was lost. What were the attributes of Sarah that were felt in reality? There was a cloud in the entrance, and there was all the doors were wide open, and we can understand from that the attributes that Sarah brought to the family as a matriarch. And when she died, everything stopped, And in a way, when Isaac brings Rivka to her tent and things are back on track, it's the feeling that things are not lost and that things are moving on. So I think this is a beautiful midrash all in all, and it is our Parashat Shavua, but we can see that the idea that there was a candle from Shabbat Eve to Shabbat Eve is in this source, right? And therefore it's clear for the writers of this midrash that this is something that happens. And this is one of the earliest sources that we have for lighting candles on Shabbat. You may notice that in this source it says candle, one candle, and actually the first minhag, the first way to perform the mitzvah was to light one candle. And we will talk about the number of the candles soon. But really, what are the reasons? You know, and many times, and that's a rule in halacha, many times we know what is being done because we know from our grandmothers, and our grandmothers know from their grandmothers, we know what's being done, but we need to know why. And sometimes the reason why is less clear than the fact that we know we should do it. So many times when you look at sources that bring the reason why we do things, they are secondary to the fact that we know we do it. We know there's a mitzvah like that. We know that it was performed, and you can see in the Talmud many times that the Talmud asks, "What's the source of this? Let's try and find out." The fact that we don't know yet what is the reason, what is the source, doesn't mean we won't do it. We will do it because we know that's how we do things. And even there's a rule in halacha, batal ta'am lo batla takana. If the reason for a certain mitzvah or a certain action that is required around the mitzvah, even if the reason is lost, the reason doesn't exist anymore, then the takana, the mitzvah, the minhag still stays, because in our tradition, the fact that it got into the tradition and it's well known to the public as a mitzvah means that even if we're trying to be smart and to be like maybe sometimes over smart, and to find a reason that seems interesting to us or seems nice to us, that doesn't mean that's the core of the mitzvah. The core of the mitzvah is the fact that it's being done, and it's being done by generations and generations. And if we like the reason, that's great. But even if the reason is not relevant anymore, the mitzvah still stands. So I think this is a very beautiful idea, a very beautiful concept, and we should remember it in many different things that we learn regarding the Jewish halakha. But here, there are three reasons that are basically connected to each other, and they're also connected to what we spoke about last week. So the first idea of the candles is honoring Shabbat. When we light the candles, we signify the fact that Shabbat starts, and we signify it with light. And so this idea of signifying Shabbat, honoring the Shabbat, is being done by a candle. This is one reason. The second reason is connected to the delight of Shabbat, oneg Shabbat, which we also spoke about last week. Not only honoring the Shabbat and giving it substance, but also having delight from Shabbat. And the sages say it in a very Jewish way, or in a very, a psychological way, that a food that is eaten in the dark is less delightful than a food that's eaten with light, which is a psychological discussion, right? Do you need to see the food in order to have pleasure from it? So this is an idea that really, one thing is to keep Shabbat in the dark, But when you keep Shabbat, when there's light around, it's a different experience. So it may seem sort of technical or sort of um, a reason that doesn't have a lot of depth and merit, but actually I think it's very deep. We are obligated to have delight in Shabbat, and so we need to have lights in our house. And the third reason, which could be connected to the second reason and could be a reason by itself, is Shlom Bayit, to have peace in the house. And it's described very figuratively in the sources that if you stumble upon something in the darkness, then you start fighting. And if you stumble and if you don't see where you're going, if you're hitting someone by mistake, or if you're falling because you didn't see the chair or that sort of thing, it stops the peace in the house. And we know that the basic blessing of Shabbat is Shabbat Shalom, right? We have a piece of Shabbat. So it's very important to keep peace, and especially between the couples, between the couple and within the family. And I want to add here something that is connected to Shlom Bayit, but not specifically to the candles, that Shabbat in many families could be, or right before Shabbat, could be a very stressful time. And it leads many times to unpleasantness in the house, either between parents and children, or between the man and the wife, because there's a lot to do and there's lots of stress, and there are things that you can't do during the Shabbat, so you have to prepare in advance. And Shabbat is, especially now in the winter, Shabbat is starting earlier and earlier. And there's a very important directive that I heard from my rabbi, that he said, whatever happens, don't be mad at your kids, or don't be mad, you and your wife, don't be mad at each other before Shabbat. Whatever happens, this is the worst thing. To get into Shabbat clean in terms of not breaking Shabbat, being prepared in all the things that Shabbat needs, but getting in with a broken heart and anger. So Shlom Bayit is very, very important, and in this sense, candle lighting is that idea also. Yes, Lars.
We mentioned it a little bit last time, but what's with the candle lighting in connection with the actual accepting of?
Yeah, we'll talk
about it later.
We'll talk about it. We'll talk about it later.
Okay.
And I just want to say, because we're talking here practicalities, and maybe not only strictly halachic practicalities, that the moment of candle lighting is really a moment that could be a moment of Shlom Bayit. If we are prepared well enough in advance, then I would warmly suggest that candle lighting will be a family thing. Gather everybody around the candles, feel the look at the flames, feel the warmth that Shabbat ends. And many times, at least in our families, it's very strong, the fact that we are all running around and preparing things and in a big stress, and all of a sudden we light the candles, and then there's nothing to do anymore. Anything we didn't prepare until now, we can't prepare anymore. And this the idea of Shlom Bayit, also between man and wife, and also between parents and their children, is expressed very, very strongly in the lighting of the candles, and we should even enhance it as much as we can. That the lighting of the candles will be a strong thing. Now, a few practicalities about the candles. The candles should be, any candle is fine. for hadlakat neot, at least any candle that we have today. It's preferable to use oil, but any kind of candle is absolutely fine. The place of lighting is connected to there's a discussion about the place of lighting, and it's connected to the reasons of lighting the candles. So if really the main idea of lighting the candles is shalom bayit, not to stumble around things, then a candle lighting should be in every room, basically. And actually, there were people who that's what they did when they lit candles. They lit candles all over the house, wherever it was dark. Nowadays, when we have electricity, then part of the mitzvah of lighting candles is lighting the house in advance to make sure that there's places that aren't supposed to be dark won't be dark. So even pressing the button and lighting the lighting the light in the room, aside from lighting candles, is part of the mitzvah of lighting candles to whoever thinks that it's that the idea is shalom bayit. And actually, there are some that suggest that when a person got to a point where they don't have Shabbat candles, in an extreme situation where they couldn't find Shabbat candles or they're stuck somewhere or whatever, lighting the lights, using the electricity to lighting the lights, it can be counted as lighting Shabbat candles, and there are some that even think you can bless the lehadlik ner shel Shabbat on lighting the candles. But you should ask your rabbi before doing such a thing. And as I said, it's only in a very extreme situation where you couldn't find candles. But if the reason of lighting candles is the light of Shabbat, which is connected basically to the food, not to eat in the dark, then the place to light the candles is in the dining room, and that is what most of Ashkenazi Jews do. Make sure that the candle lighting is in the dining room, or at least in a place where you can see the candles from the dining room. So some of the light of the candles will touch upon the dining room. Who is lighting? As we all know, this is a mitzvah that was primarily geared towards women, even though anybody could light the candles. There are many reasons that were given why women are the primary holders of that mitzvah. Some said it's because the woman is the one who was the strongest in keeping the peace in the family. The shalom bayit is something that the woman is better at than the man. There are other reasons as well, but it is a mitzvah for the woman to light the candles, and even there is a source that says that it's important for women to do three things: bless the challah and keep the nida and light the candles of Shabbat. Keep the laws of purity and light the candles of Shabbat.
Rav Natan,
Yes.
I just want to add on the opposite side, I think it's so obvious that to everyone that the women are the ones lighting, but as you said, if there is the mitzvah is for the homes, so that I've heard confusion before. Oh, well, my wife isn't home this Shabbat, so we're not going to have Shabbat candles. So if there is no woman of the house, or a person is not yet married, then the mitzvah is to light candles. And also, if you were not to be at home, or if, let's say, for example, someone travels somewhere else for a business trip. So even if the wife is lighting at home, one should still light the candles where they are, because wherever you are, as you mentioned, there's different reasons we need the candles to be lit. Even if our kids are going over and bat mitzvah, let's say if they're going to Glemstar or some summer camp, then they should light the candles. We should teach them the mitzvah that they should be lighting the candles as well. Wherever one is keeping Shabbat, then there should be candles lit. And especially, as you mentioned, where someone is eating. So even if I was eating, for example, if I lit at home and I'm eating somewhere else, there should also be candles lit as well. So if I'm hosted by someone else, that's not a problem. But let's say I was eating in the candle in the community, then there should also be Shabbat candles, if possible, next to where I'm eating it, so I'm able to benefit for all of the reasons that you mentioned before, Rav Natan. So just adding a few additions there.
Thank you. There's a whole discussion regarding the blessing of the candles, which is important, because the question is, if you're lighting the candles, are you accepting Shabbat immediately, and then I'll say it like this: there is a rule that mitzvah has to be over la'asiyatan. In other words, after you first say the bracha, and then you light the candles. And so it would make sense that we first say the bracha, lahadlik ner shel Shabbat, and then light the candles. But the problem with that is that then if we blow the fire from the match, it will be chilul Shabbat. It will be breaking the Shabbat, since we already we've lit the candles. So there's a special idea in candle lighting, that we first light the candles, and then we bless. We light the candle, we blow the match, and then we bless the candles. But then the question is, what about, the fact that we are supposed to first light the first bless and then perform the mitzvah, and therefore the minhag is that you light the candles, you blow the match, and then you close your eyes. And the closing of the eyes is the way to wait before you use the lights of the candles. And so you close your eyes, and then you bless. And when we bless with our eyes closed, it's as if we're not using the candles yet for the mitzvah. And so we're blessing with our eyes closed, and then we open our eyes and we see the candles. And I will just add that there are many, many different minhagim of what we should do, what women should do when they close their eyes. Many women pray for the health of their families and others. Many women pray for their family. Many women pray for other things. There are some who read prayers that were written especially for candle lighting, and some who are inventing their own blessing. Each woman should do what she would like. In the book, you will see one prayer that is well known and well spread for women to say while their eyes are closed. Yes, Lars, and then Gisa Sarah.
Yes, today when we make the candle lighting, we gather the family around and light the candle, and there are some brachas also for the children and everything. But you said that before electricity, you actually lit the candle in every room in order to have the light. But today we don't do that. We fix every electricity, so it should be stable during the whole Shabbat. But wasn't I mean, before electricity, wasn't lighting the candles, wasn't that a ritual like now? Was it just a practical thing to light up the house, or was it also this ritual when you gather together? And
So again, it's a question of the reasons. I don't know. I never checked what historically do we have accounts of a ritual of lighting the candles. There is a place in the Talmud where it says that that a man should tell his family members light the candle. So it seems like there was such a in a way a ritual, but of course it was also very practical, and I think it's something very beautiful that it comes from a very practical thing. And actually, just I'll mention, we won't get into it, but in the Shulchan Aruch there's a whole there's a whole part talking about what do you do when the candle is lit in your room and you want to open the door and then you might blow it, because you're getting into serious problems there. If you have many fires around the house, and then you want to open a window, open a door, and you're causing the candle to blow out, in many cases it might be a direct violation of Shabbat. So there's a whole section about how can you do it properly, and maybe the reason that it didn't continue, it was not only because of Shabbat of electricity, but also because it was dangerous in terms of the halachot of Shabbat.
yes, but I think it's actually a very good thing to also comprise all the other lights that you arranged, that you said that it's a part of the candle lighting. It's not just this old tradition. It's actually part of setting it's the finishing of setting the everything. It's the last thing you do before
Absolutely.
actually. So it's it's a very beautiful thing to think about, that the other lightning of the setting of the lightnings is a part of this. I like that.
Absolutely. And I just might add, probably here in the Nordic Beit Midrash, we don't need to add that, but of course, pikuach nefesh is more important than anything. So if there's any kind of danger regarding lighting the candles around the house, we shouldn't keep fire unnoticed. So we don't have to, if we're looking for a mitzvah to do in a big way, maybe it doesn't have to be candle lighting in all the rooms.
No.
Gisa Sarah, yes, you raised your hand.
Yeah, thank you. My question is about the covering the head, because I am aware that unmarried women, they don't need to cover their head. That's clear. But I have seen, meanwhile, they light the candles, a lot of women cover their heads, even though they are not married. Is there any special reason for that?
As much as I know, there's nothing forbidden in covering. You mean covering the head, not the
covering
eyes.
the head, meanwhile you're lighting
Covering the head. I don't think you need to cover your head while lighting the candles.
Okay.
If you want to do it in a sense of honoring the Shabbat, it's okay, like wearing any kind of hat or beautiful cover. It's okay, but regarding the religious ritual, as much as I know, it's not a requirement.
Okay, that's what I wanted to understand. Thank you very much.
Yes, Michael and Eva.
I just in the beginning you say something about why we ended with 2 lights and not with 1, and I don't know if I messed it or you didn't.
No, I just was about to talk about this.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. So regarding the number of the candles, so it started with 1 candle, and in most primary sources the language is the ner, the candle, and not the candles. Eventually, number two sort of took over on generally on Shabbat. Also, there are many things that we do double on Shabbat, and most of them are coming from Zachor and Shamor, like we spoke last week. Zachor and Shamor, the two fundamentals of Shabbat, are leading to the idea of having two candles. And nowadays there's a widespread minhag that every child that is added to the family, you bring in another candle to light, and that's I think that's a beautiful minhag. It's only a minhag, it's not a mitzvah, and when you're on your way, you can perfectly use two candles. But the idea of adding another candle for every child and lighting candles, so to speak, for the whole family, I think is beautiful. I wanted one more thing to say about the number. Oh, that there are sources that say that when a woman finds that she forgot to light candles, or she didn't make it, or somehow she missed lighting candles one Shabbat, she should take upon herself to light one more candle every Shabbat from that time on. I saw some who say that that it's a basic requirement that any person who forgot or didn't light a candle should add another candle. I saw some that say that you don't have to go by it. So every family should do what they think is right for them, but you should just know that it exists and you should take that into account. I just got the message from Rabbi Moshe David regarding covering the hair, that the Sfaradim, the Jews from the East and from Arab countries, they cover their head also if they're not married while lighting the candles. I didn't know that. So that's for Gisa Sarah's question. Candle lighting is the time that women accept Shabbat, but it's not the time that men accept Shabbat. We will talk about it soon. That the formal accepting of Shabbat is in the synagogue during the prayer, but candle lighting is the place where the family accepts Shabbat, and therefore women are not allowed to do something that violates Shabbat after lighting the candles. There is an option that a woman would light the candles, stating in her mind, doesn't have to be outspoken, but stating in her mind that there is one specific thing or a few specific things that she knows she will want to do after candle lighting, and that is approved. So if you're lighting candles and still there is a little more time till Shabbat, and you want just to, I don't know, finish a small detail, it's possible to say that you're lighting candles and you're going to do a specific thing that is left for you. But in general, Shabbat, lighting candles is the way that the family accepts Shabbat. And after that, if there's something that we forgot, it's preferable that the child or the husband that didn't light the candle would do it, and not the woman who lighted the candles already. But regarding the time when Shabbat enters, it's a whole subject that is less practical. It's more theoretical, and we will have a separate shiur regarding that, and not close, but sometimes during our learning session, and we will move on to Shabbat prayer. Lars, yes.
Yes, sure. But today, now, this, for example, this Shabbat, then the candle lighting was about 15:45 or something like that, and the Kabbalat Shabbat was at like 6 o'clock in the evening.
Right. So here,
what's with the time between there for me?
Okay, so I will say something about that. Since you asked this question, it means that it's needed.
Yeah.
In just in short, because we will do a separate view on that. But in our countries, in the Scandinavian countries, which are very north, there's a huge gap between the time of entering Shabbat. Shabbat enters in the winter very early, and in the summer very, very late. And so the time in the Luach, at least in the Swedish Luach, for the prayer, is not the time that Shabbat starts. The Shabbat starts at candle lighting. That's when the beginning of Shabbat is, and after that we're not allowed to do any work. The reason that we're doing the prayer late is because we're worried that people won't come to prayer when it's so early. But you can, if you don't have a minyan, you can pray right after lighting the candles, also in the winter. In the summer, it's almost the opposite. The time of candle lighting is the earliest possible. It's before the time that most Jews most Jews around the world are accepting Shabbat, because if we would have accepted Shabbat on the normal time, it would be very, very, very late. And the way that it's being calculated and why and how will be for later times. But I hope I answered the technical, practical questions. No, you're not allowed to perform any kind of work after candle lighting in the winter. Yes, Kato and Monica, yes.
Yeah, just a comment with regard to the number of candles. You might have mentioned it before, but the reason for it being 2 lights is that the first one is for the remembrance with reference to Exodus, and the second one is for the observance of the Shabbat. So that's the main reason for it being 2 in the starting point.
Yes, that's exactly what we said about Zachor and Shamor, remember and keep.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Shabbat Eve. Now we're getting to an area which is even less halachic per se, but it's still very important. Kabbalat Shabbat. So again, it's the idea of the honor of Shabbat. Formally, Shabbat, we don't have extra prayers. The only extra prayer that we will meet next week, which is Musaf, and that is due to the fact that there was another sacrifice on Shabbat morning that was sacrificed, so we add another prayer. But Kabbalat Shabbat, but Shabbat could start from Arvit, like any other day, that the day starts with Arvit, with the night prayer. That's when every day in the Jewish calendar starts. Days start from the night and not from the morning. This is an important concept. I don't know, maybe it needs to be said out clear. We start Shabbat in the evening because every day in the Jewish calendar starts in the evening. It's not at 12 at night like the general calendar is. The next day doesn't start at 12 at night, but the new day starts when the sun finishes to set and the night starts. So we could have started from Tfilat Arvit, and for many generations, that's what happened. Shabbat started. Even when they lighted the candles, and then they prayed an evening prayer. But already in the Talmud, there is a recording of sages who would say a bit more. And I brought the source here from the Talmud, Tractate Shabbat. Rabbi Hanina would wrap himself in his garment and stand at nightfall on Shabbat Eve and say, "Come and we will go to greet Shabbat the Queen." Rabbi Yanai, a different sage from the same time, more or less, put on his garment on Shabbat Eve and said, "Enter, O bride, enter, O bride," what we recognize from Lechadodi, "Boi kala, boi kala." So there is a sense of festivity, a sense of, I would say, even ceremonial way that we want to greet Shabbat. It's not written in the Torah. It's not something that is a mitzvah, but it's a strong feeling that we can't. Shabbat doesn't enter without us greet, or she does, but we don't want to let Shabbat enter without greeting her. And so we want to greet Shabbat. So those sages would say one word, one sentence, boi kala, boi kala. But also the idea, Rabbi Hanina, bo v'netzeh, let's go out and greet Shabbat the Queen, as if Shabbat is somebody who's coming in, which is a beautiful concept. I think it's not on like every day. She's the Queen. She's coming into our house. She's arriving, and we can get out and greet her. And later on, in Tzfat, in the 16th century, when mysticism and Kabbalah became very strong, with the holy Ari, Rabbi Yitzchak Ashkenazi, the one of maybe the first main Kabbalist we have. There started to be a ceremony of greeting Shabbat. And actually, if you go to Tzfat and you do a tour there's a synagogue that is called the Synagogue of the Ari, the Synagogue of the Holy Ari. And there are two synagogues, one, and it's in two different locations. And the explanation is that one of the synagogues, which it's called the Ari Hasfaradi, the Ari where they daven in the Eastern Nusach, in the Nusach of the Arab countries, that's where the Ari used to have the synagogue. And the Ari Ashkenazi, the Ashkenazi synagogue, is where the Ari used to go out to the field and greet Shabbat. So he used to gather all of his students, and they would actually go out to the field and greet Shabbat. And I brought here, for anyone who knows some Hebrew, we won't read it, but the white source here is a quote from Rabbi Chaim Vital, one of the Ari's students, who describes how should you do it. And it's still there's no Lecha Dodi yet. There's no special text for it, but you should stand in the field, and it's better to see it to go to a place where there are no buildings, and you close your eyes and you put your left hand on your chest, and a whole ritual that seems very meditative, very mystical, for accepting Shabbat. So these are the sources for Kabbalat Shabbat. Kabbalat Shabbat is something that we Jews brought to Shabbat as an excitement that Shabbat enters. And it's still like that in most shuls, that Kabbalat Shabbat is an exciting time. It's a special time. And I think one of the reasons it's a special time because it is our initiative. Our initiative as Jews. We didn't get we weren't told to do it. We just couldn't stop ourselves from accepting Shabbat. So Kabbalat Shabbat contains 5 psalms, and those psalms were chosen by the Ari, and they're talking about the redemption and about God being the King of the world. Then there is we say Ana Bekoach. Ana Bekoach is a beautiful text, a much later text, even later than the Ari, and it's a mystical text. The initials of all the letters of Ana Bekoach make together the holy name of God that has 60, I think 66 letters, maybe I'm wrong there. But so it is also a nice prayer by itself, but the point of Ana Bekoach is not so much the words, but the letters that the words start with, and that they build to one of the holy long names of God, which we can't say out loud, and it's hard to say in the mouth. We won't get into Ana Bekoach. There's much to speak about that also. The times that we say Ana Bekoach are very special times. The Ashkenaz Nusach, which most of the Scandinavian countries don't say Ana Bekoach. This is a Kabbalistic thing. But the rest of Kabbalat Shabbat is also a Kabbalistic thing, and still it got into all of the communities of Israel, from the east to the west, in all traditions. Lecha Dodi is a song that we could talk about for at least a semester, if not more. Many depths in Lecha Dodi, and you should make an effort and learn it also at depth, because it's very, very interesting, and there are many questions. Who is talking to whom? Who's the kala? Who's the bride? And who's the dod, the groom? What are the subjects of all the verses in Lecha Dodi? It's extremely interesting, and it contains a lot of this of the spirit of Shabbat in Lecha Dodi. The only practical thing that we need to remember about Lecha Dodi is the turning around. In the last verse, Bo'i b'shalom materet ba'ala, the custom is to turn around, because this is the verse where we actually accept Shabbat in, and it finishes with the old lines that Rabbi Yanai already said, Boi kala. So we turn our backs to the entrance of the shul, as if the Shabbat is coming in physically almost. And originally you didn't turn to the entrance, you turned to the west, but we won't get into that. After Lecha Dodi, there are 2 psalms also brought in by the students of the Ari, Mizmor Shir Leyom HaShabbat and Adonai Malach Geut Lavesh. It's important just to state that later on, when this was all accepted, then according to halacha, when a person says Mizmor Shir Leyom HaShabbat, that is when he accepted Shabbat upon himself. That is when the synagogue accepts Shabbat, and from that point on, you're not allowed to do any Melacha, of course, nowadays, as I said before, there are reasons to keep the Shabbat from the time of candle lighting, especially in the winter. But the individual and the communal acceptance of Shabbat is in Mizmor Shir, and we should think about it while we are saying Mizmor Shir, that now I am accepting Shabbat upon myself. Moving on in the prayer after Mizmor Shir Yom Shabbat, at least most of communities in Scandinavia go straight to Arvit. There are some communities, I think, that say Bameh Madlikin at this point. And I will just say shortly, I'll say it afterwards. The Amidah of Shabbat is a special Amidah. It's not an everyday Amidah. We don't have 18 blessings, but 7 blessings. And the blessing is about Shabbat. And what is very important is that the first thing we do after the Amidah is to say Vayichulu. Now, Vayichulu is considered, there are many things that are written in the Talmud about this Vayichulu. Many different ideas, beautiful ideas that we're joining God in the creation of the world when we're saying Vayichulu. We're taking part in the creation of, in the end of the creation of the world and resting on Shabbat. And it's considered a testimony for God's creation of the Shabbat, and therefore it should be said while standing, like when we're giving a testimony, and we should say it together. And the practical sense of Vayichulu is that even if you are not praying in a minyan and everybody is praying to themselves, Vayichulu should be said together, at least as a duo. And if you're not saying it as a duo, you shouldn't say Vayichulu. So you should skip it if you are absolutely alone and you don't have anybody next to you. Then you need to skip Vayichulu because you can't give testimony only in one. Bameh Madlikin is a text that talks about it's basically a whole chapter from Mishnah of the tractate of Shabbat. The Mishnah, that's the chapter that speaks about what are the allowed things to use for candles, both in terms of the wick and in terms of the oil. And the prominent reason for that is to remind ourselves if we did everything correctly, and to mention our sages also in prayer, which is something that we do almost every prayer. We mention something from the Mishnah or from the Talmud as memorizing that we say things that our prayer is connected not only to what is written in the Torah, but also to our oral law. There is a minhag of doing a kiddush in the synagogue in many of the Scandinavian communities. The reason was because many Jews didn't know, either there were guests in the synagogue that would eat in the synagogue, and the kiddush was for them, or for people who didn't know how to make kiddush. The important thing regarding that is that it's not. It doesn't. We're not free of making kiddush at home because we heard the kiddush in the synagogue. the kiddush in the synagogue is a special kiddush, and it's problematic in different ways. The person who does kiddush in the synagogue, a custom that is well spread is not to drink the wine of the kiddush, and give it to a small child who's not bar mitzvah yet. The whole problem with this kiddush in the synagogue is that, and we will speak about it next time, that kiddush has to be in the place of the meal. It's the beginning of the meal, and it has to be in this place of the meal. And doing kiddush in this vacant area of having a prayer and not having a meal yet is problematic. And therefore, those who do the kiddush in the synagogue and shouldn't drink. If you drink, it's fine, because as we said, it's a custom and it's a takana. And even if people don't eat anymore in the synagogue, still we're not stopping the takana. It's a perfect example of what we spoke about in the beginning of the shiur today. So if there's no small child, feel free to drink the wine. But if there is a small child, it's preferable to give him. And if you're not doing the kiddush, but you're listening to the kiddush, I want to make sure you remember that you should do again kiddush at your house, especially if there was one of the family members who wasn't in the synagogue. But even if there was, since a kiddush should be in the place of the meal, we should do kiddush again. I wanted to talk about the meal this week also, but we will leave it for next week. Next week we'll talk about all the meals, both of Shabbat night, Shabbat day, and Shabbat afternoon. If there, the shiur is formally ended, but if you have any questions, I would be happy to answer any of the questions. And thank you. Have a very, very good week. Yes, Michael and Iwa.
Thank you.
Just once, sorry, just before anyone leaves, an important technical message. From next week on, we will have a new link for the shiur. So if you're not registered, please do so at info@scandin.org. I just send it on the link. Again, we'll have a new link for the shiur from next week on, and it's an opportunity to thank Helena, who's been administering this shiur and helping us behind the scenes. So I just wanted to thank Helena, but we'll be transferring to a new YouTube channel and a new link as well, with the shlichot from Oslo. So please make sure to check your email. If this email didn't bounce into the spam or something, so that you'll know where to connect next week. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
My question was about how we can see the last shiur, but did I understand correct that we will get a link on the email that we can use?
Yes, I will send a link to both to the old YouTube channel where the shiurim are, and the new one where we will, and I'll transfer. I hope to transfer them as well. But we have a YouTube channel where you can get all the previous shiurim, and I'll include all the information in the email that you will receive.
Okay, thank you, and thank you for a very interesting shiur.
Lars.
Yeah, I have some question on overtime here. We last time we spoke about things for the preparation and like the necessity in or maybe open metal cans, for example. But when I read about and thought about this a little bit, I mean, open a can, that's about making almost something new. It's creating almost something when you open. You can. But for example, when you take a paper bag and you rip it, you destroy something, but you don't destroy the food. And what I remember is that we talked about that you can destroy something if the destroying is not about the forbidden thing in itself. So is it actually forbidden or not forbidden to open things that is set in some paper that you have to open with a rip?
You mean on Shabbat?
Yes, on Shabbat.
So you will have a special lesson about that. But generally, yes, you're allowed to do this as long as you're really ripping it. You need to make sure not to rip words that are written on this, because that is considered erasing, which is a forbidden work on Shabbat. And you should rip it in a way that it can't contain anymore the thing that is in it.
You
But,
mean that if I rip it, then I take everything out?
Yes.
Ah, okay. That was the one thing I thought about this Shabbat. So, you know, when you have learned it before.
Great.
And
Great. Yes. Any other questions, or I have time?
please, someone.
Okay. So Shavua Tov to everybody, and thank you. We will meet next week, and all the best.
Yes.
Shabbat Tov.
Shabbat.